This is the 11th lesson in our study of Old Testament history and our last lesson in studying Abraham's journey. We've already seen 12 stations in Abraham's journey. Let's review those so that we know where we are today. The first station is Ur, and the thing to remember is the place of his birth. The second station is Haran, where he went with his family, father and mother and Lot and his wife, up to Haran, and the thing to remember there is Terah dies and the second call. The third station is Shechem, where he fed his sheep, pitched his tent, and built an altar to worship God. Fourth station is Bethel, same thing. He made an altar to God, pitched his tent, fed his sheep, ran out of pasture. The fifth statement is Egypt, always grain in Egypt. And we remember here the first lie, and the being expelled from the country, but being given great riches as he leaves. The sixth station is back at Bethel. And here there's trouble between his servants and Lot's servants as to which of their masters are the greatest. And Abraham gave Lot the choice of the land, and Lot chose the well-watered pasture land, and Abraham was left with the mountainous country. And he moved from there to Hebron, where there is, although mountainous country, the best of the grain in the land. That's the seventh station. The eighth station is Dan. And the reason he went to Dan was that the kings of the east had come and conquered Sodom and Gomorrah, and because Lot lived in Sodom, had carried Lot and his family and goods captive back to Mesopotamia. Abraham gathered his 318 men, his army, born in his own house, pursued them to Dan, defeated them, and brought Lot and his things back toward the south, back toward Sodom. On the way back to Hebron, which will be the ninth station, Hebron. On the way back to Hebron, he met Melchizedek. God made a covenant with him. Lots of great things happened there, but the primary thing to remember is the covenant. And then at Gerar, the 10th station, he lied again, this time to Abimelech, the king of the Canaanites, and again cast out of the land and away, but made rich by Abimelech, because Abimelech was afraid of him because he was a servant of God. And there also Isaac is born. At Beersheba, a covenant is made with Abimelech that they will help one another and they'll not fight nor deceive one another again. And then the 12th station was Moriah, the land of Moriah, but particularly a mountain there where Abraham offered his son Isaac. Now, he didn't have to kill him, but he offered him. The knife was in his hand. It was poised at his son's throat when God called him to attention and pointed him to a ram that was offered instead of Isaac. Once that is done, they return to Beersheba, where they're living at the time. And in chapter 22, verses 19 to 24, there's only one thing that happens here at Beersheba. He learns of Nahor's having children, one of whom was a woman named Rebekah. And that's important because she will become the wife of Isaac. If you look at chapter 23 of Genesis, we'll look at the 13th station was Beersheba. The one thing to remember is he learns of Nahor's children, and that's important because we need a wife for Isaac later. And then at Hebron, he moves up to Hebron, goes up to Hebron because Sarah dies. Notice chapter 23. Sarah lived to be 127 years old, so she saw Isaac's 37th year. She died at Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham went to mourn for Sarah and to weep over her. Now, I don't know why Sarah's in Hebron and he's in Beersheba. Probably because the lady's old and doesn't want to travel with Abraham as he hunts for pasture land for his sheep. Now, after Abraham has mourned for a while over Sarah, you have the purchase of a burial site. And one of the most interesting examples of Oriental bargaining to be found in any literature. So I want you to read it with me in 23 verse 3 beginning. Then Abraham arose from beside his dead wife and spoke to the Hittites. He said, I'm an alien and a stranger among you. Sell me some property for a burial site here so I can bury my dead. Verse 5, the Hittites replied to Abraham, Sir, listen to us. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will refuse you his tomb for burying your dead. Wide open field. Anybody, any tomb you want. Then Abraham arose, verse 7, and bowed down before the people of the land of the Hittites. He said, if you're willing to let me bury my dead, then listen to me, and intercede with Ephron, son of Zohar, on my behalf, so that he will sell me. You're not asking for a gift. So that he'll sell me the cave of Machpelah, which belongs to him and is at the end of his field. Ask him to sell it to me for the full price as a burial site among you. Abraham is too full of sorrow and mourning for Sarah to want to bargain. So he says, I'll buy the field, I'll buy the cave, I'll pay the full price. But for Ephron just to name a price and to take it would be to lose face before the people, for this is a mighty prince. So notice Ephron's reply, beginning in verse 10. Ephron the Hittite was sitting among his people, and he replied to Abraham in the hearing of all the Hittites who'd come to the gate of his city. No, my lord, he said, listen to me. I give you the field. I give you the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of my people. Bury the dead. He says, I give, I give, I give. But if Abraham takes, he loses face. Ephron is not wanting to give it away. It's just an honorable, pleasant way to reply to a person you count superior to you. Again, Abraham bowed down before the people of the land, and he said to Ephron in the hearing, listen to me, if you will. I will pay the price of the field. Accept it from me so I can bury my dead. Abraham is having none of the gift he wants to purchase. Watch Ephron's reply in verse 14, as he very tactfully names the price. Ephron answered Abraham, listen to me, my lord. The land's worth 400 shekels of silver. That's about 10 pounds of silver. But what's that between me and you? Bury your dead. Now it sounds like he's saying again, I don't want any money for such a little bit of land and such a little bit of silver. What's that between two princes like us? Just go ahead and take it. That's not what he's saying. He is naming the price that Abraham wanted named. I know that because verse 16. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms. It didn't sound like terms. They're both coming out of there with their face saved. Nobody's embarrassed. Nobody's lost any honor. And Abraham has purchased, I'm sure at full price, that fellow's field. Abraham agreed to Ephron's terms and weighed out for him the price he'd named in the hearing of the Hittites, 400 shekels of silver, according to the weight current among the merchants. So Ephron's field in Machpelah near Mamre, both the field and the cave in it, and all the trees within the border of the field, was deeded to Abraham as his property in the presence of all the Hittites who'd come to the gate of the city. Afterward, Abraham buried his wife Sarah in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, which is at Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave in it were deeded to Abraham by the Hittites as a burial site. I would like to have been there to observe that. I mean, that's a beautiful piece of honorable, sensible bargaining. Sarah's buried there. Abraham will be buried there. Rebekah, Isaac's wife, will be buried there. Isaac will be buried there. Leah, the legitimate and first wife of Jacob, will be buried there, and Jacob will be buried there. This cave will end up containing Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and their legitimate wives. Abraham has purchased a family burial cave. Now, Isaac needs a wife. And really, chapter 24 would better be studied under Isaac. So we're going to study it here, but when we get to the next lesson, well, you remember this is the first point of Isaac's life. There needs to be a wife. Isaac is a grown man. Abraham is old, and it's time for Isaac to be married. This, too, is so interesting. I want us to read nearly all of it. I know we're doing a lot of reading, but that's what the Bible is, isn't it? It's written for us to read. We'll comment and study as we go. On your outline, this is simply called a wife for Isaac, Rebekah, chapter 24. Abraham was now old and well advanced in years. And the Lord had blessed him in every way, as the promise in Genesis 12, covenant in 15. He said to the chief servant in his household, that's Eliezer, the one in charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh. The strongest muscle in man's body is the muscle under his thigh. He's going to swear by Abraham's strength, and that's swearing by the Lord, because the Lord is Abraham's strength. He said, put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you'll not get a wife from my son, from the daughter of the Canaanites among whom I'm living, but will go to my country and my own relatives and get a wife for my son Isaac. How does he know there's a marriageable woman there? Remember earlier in Beersheba, he'd got the word of Nahor's children. The servant asked him, what if the woman's unwilling to come back to me to this land? Shall I then take your son back to the country you came from? Make sure that you do not take my son back there, Abraham said. The Lord, the God of heaven, who brought me out of my father's household in my native land, who spoke to me and promised me on oath, saying, to your offspring I'll give this land, he will send his angel before you that you may get a wife for my son there. Abraham's faith is strong on this occasion. He knows that God will guide Eliezer to just the right person for Isaac to marry. He said, if the woman's unwilling to come back, you're released from this oath of mine. Only do not take my son back there. Why? We don't find out why until nearly the end of the book of Joshua. Because Joshua challenges the people, or charges the people, to choose whom they will serve, whether the gods their fathers served beyond the Euphrates, or the God of the Amorites among whom they live. And so all of Abraham's forebears were idolaters and polytheists, worshiped many gods. And he does not want his seed to go back to that land of idolatry. He says, so the servant put his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore an oath to him concerning this matter. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and left. He comes down in verse 11. It's toward evening, and the time the women go out to draw water. And in verse 12, watch Eliezer's faith in God. Then he prayed, O Lord God of my master Abraham, show me success today, and show kindness to my master Abraham. See, I'm standing beside the spring, and the daughters of the townspeople are coming out to draw water. May it be when I say to a girl, please let down your water that I may have a drink. And she says, drink, and I'll water your camels too. Let her be the one you've chosen for your servant Isaac. By this I will know that you've shown kindness to my master. Have you ever watched a camel drink? Have you ever seen a camel drink? They drink for a while. They can drink buckets and buckets of water. So evidently he wanted a woman that would work. A woman that was willing not only to give him a drink, but to stay there for nearly an hour or so it would take to water all those camels. When he'd finished praying, verse 15, Rebekah came out with her jar on her shoulder. We've already heard of Rebekah, being a daughter of Nahor. She was the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, who was the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin. No man had ever lain with her. She went out to the spring, filled her jar, and came up again. You go down into the well on steps. You come out of the well on steps. The servant hurried to meet her and said, please give me a little water from your jar. Drink, my lord, she said, and quickly lowered the jar to her hands and gave him a drink. After she'd given him a drink, she said, I'll draw water for your camels too until they have finished drinking. She's going up and down, up and down, up and down those stairs. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw more water and drew enough for all his camels. Without saying a word, the man watched her closely to learn whether or not the Lord had made his journey successful. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took out a gold nose ring weighing a beka and 2 gold bracelets weighing 10 shekels. That'd be about $100 worth of material. Then he asked her, whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son that Milcah bore to Nahor. And she added, we have plenty of straw and fodder, as well as room for you to spend the night. And then the man bowed down and worshiped God, saying, praise be God, who has not abandoned me. As for me, the Lord has made my journey successful to the house of my master's relatives. The girl ran and told her mother's household about these things. Now, Rebekah had a brother named Laban. Now, hold on to him, because later on, he's going to be the center of a contest between Abraham's grandson, Jacob. And he hurried out to the man at the spring. He'd seen the nose ring, the bracelets. He heard that what Rebekah had said about the man. And he says, "Come, blessed of my Lord, while you're standing out here, I have prepared the house and a place for the camels." So the man went in. Food was set before them. And he said in verse 33, "I will not eat until I've told you what I have to say." "Then tell us," Laban said. He said, verse 34, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed me abundantly. He's become wealthy. He has given him silver and cattle and silver and gold and men servants and maid servants and camels and donkeys. My master's wife Sarah has borne him a son in her old age, and he's given him everything he owns. And my master made me swear that I would come here to his family to get a wife for his son." Then I asked my master, "What if the woman won't come?" He said, "If you won't come, you're relieved from the oath." I came to the spring. He's just rehearsing it all. I came to the spring and I said, "Lord, if a woman comes and not only will give me drink but will water my camels, then let that be the one you've chosen." Verse 45. Before I'd finished praying in my heart, Rebekah came out and she gave me a drink and she watered the camels. And I said, "Whose daughter are you?" She said, "I'm the daughter of Nahor, Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore him." And I gave her this. And now I'm come to ask if she will be the wife of my master Isaac. Now, we've just hurried to verse 50, all right? In verse 50, Laban and Bethuel answered, "This is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you one way or the other. Here's Rebekah. Take her and go, and let her become the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has directed." Have you noticed that it looked like she really didn't have much say in this? She's just going to be the wife. She goes. I'm going to skip over a bunch, all right? They get her ready, and she goes, and they ask her, "Will you go with a man?" She said, "I'll gladly go." And they bless Rebekah, and she leaves, and she's going to be blessed by having thousands upon thousands of offspring. And Isaac is down in Beer-lahai-roi, still mourning his mother Sarah's death, and he sees them coming, and he goes out to meet Rebekah. And they see them approaching, and they tell Rebekah, "This is the master." So Rebekah looked up and got down off her camel, put on her veil, covered herself. Isaac, verse 67, brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah. So she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And so this is, again, I wouldn't get married this way. But this is ordinary Mideastern custom. The lady has very little choice. She's asked if she wants to go. She agrees to go. She and Isaac have never seen each other until this occasion, but immediately accept each other as husband and wife, and he is comforted about his mother's death. There's an interesting statement there in verse 67 I want to bring back up. So she became his wife, and he loved her. Now, in my culture, it's he loved her, and she became his wife. But in that culture, she became his wife, and he loved her, which indicates that love is something you can learn. That marriage is something you can accept, and within that marriage you can come to love a woman. Rebekah, we're going to find out, is sort of a tricky little lady. We'll find out when the trouble comes between her and her husband concerning the two boys. End of the journey. Abraham's about to die. But before his death, we read about a second marriage in chapter 25, verse 1. I think this is after Sarah has died. Abraham took another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Yokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Now, you don't need to remember those names, but I think it'd be good to remember he had 6 sons by this lady. But verse 5 says he left everything he owned to Isaac. They didn't get any of his possessions. But while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. So he had a second wife, and he had concubines, but none of them possessed with Isaac. Verse 7, altogether Abraham lived 175 years. Now, he was 75 years old when his father died, so he lives 100 years in Promised Land. Then Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and full of years. He was gathered to his people. Notice verse 9. His sons Isaac and Ishmael. Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite, the field Abraham had brought from the Hittite. There Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who lived near Beer-lahai-roi. You remember that? That is the place where Ishmael's mother Hagar was comforted, and they both received the water that preserved their life. That's in the southernmost part of what we call the Promised Land. There's trails in for Abraham. His life has not been without problem. A great man traveled from one end of the world at that time to the other end of that world at that time. Was put in a rather obscure, isolated place so that he could worship the one God that he loved more than he loved life. But Abraham is now dead. His life is over. And we will begin the life of Isaac. I think it might be good if you were to turn with me over the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. Let's get a writer's testimony in brief verses about the greatness of this man's life that we've studied now for 4 lessons. In Hebrews chapter 11, beginning with verse 8, read with me. Are you there? Good. By faith Abraham, when called to go out to a place he would later receive it as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. See, faith starts a journey when it doesn't know the end. Faith starts a journey when it does not know the destination. By faith, he made his home in the Promised Land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. You see, faith accepts promises not yet received. That's what faith is. It is the belief that I'm in possession of something that I'm not yet in possession of. It believes in things not seen. Then verse 11. By faith Abraham. Number one, by faith Abraham went out not knowing where he was going. By faith Abraham accepted a possession he did not yet have hold of. Then number 3, by faith Abraham, even though he was past age, and Sarah herself was barren, was enabled to become a father because he considered him faithful who had made the promise. Why was he able to continue? He considered God faithful. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. You see, faith believes the impossible. Anybody can believe the possible, but faith believes the impossible. One more time, verse 17. By faith, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Watch verse 19. Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively, he did receive Isaac back from the dead. There is just a quick survey of Abraham's life. Faith goes when it doesn't know where it's going. Faith receives even though it has not yet received. Faith believes even when it's impossible for it to be fulfilled. And faith receives or reasons that God is even able to raise the dead. And in a real sense, Abraham did receive his son back from the dead. Now back in Genesis. There's one more thing in our section here. It's on your outline. And that is Ishmael's generations are listed in chapter 25, verses 12 through 18. This is the account of Abraham's son Ishmael, whom Sarah maidservant Hagar the Egyptian bore to Abraham. These are the names of the son of Ishmael. We're not going to list all those names, not going to read all those names, but they're all 12 listed in verse 14 and 15. Then in verse 16, These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are the names of the 12 tribal rulers according to their settlements and their camps. Ishmael becomes 12 nations. This is one great man. All of the Arabs are descendant from Ishmael. Altogether, Ishmael lived 137 years. He breathed his last and died. He was gathered to his people. His descendants settled in the area from Havilah to Shur, near the border of Egypt. That's from the southern end of the Dead Sea all the way to Egypt, to the desert there, as you go toward Ashur. And they lived in hostility among or toward all their brothers. That had been promised. Ishmael will be a hostile, warring set of nations throughout all of time. In history, that's been true. The Arabs have always lived in that desert, moved around in tribal groups. They've never been a strong nation. One time they were united, called the United Arab Republic. But now, as always, they are a scattered people. They are not a settled nation. Isaac will become a settled nation, Israel. Ishmael will not. It is good that we learn the lesson of faith. Abraham was a man of faith. Isaac was a man of faith. And therefore they could live in settled, united condition with God and with mankind. Let's try to find the way to be one in Jesus Christ.